another TLAV video was just censored. And you actually, it's completely unsurprising which one they chose to focus on. And this is another one based on Whitney Webb's amazing research about the artificial intelligence plan that has become the coronavirus plan. And there's absolutely nothing in that that's even, every single thing we talked about is documented evidence in U.S. documentation, in their own plans, in their own legislation. This is stuff that is absolutely documented. And they claim that I violated they don't, of course, like usual, it doesn't give you just an ambiguous thing. You violated something within our community guidelines. We don't ever really get to understand. And then they say, well, here's your 3-hour video. Go ahead and pick out the part that's wrong and let us know when you're done. And then we'll decide if it's still good, even though we don't know what part, where, or what we did wrong. That's all, as I've mentioned many times, this is how it's a faceless, nameless unaccountability of YouTube. We never get to find out. And also see what it says right there, was flagged for us to review. And this is the fallacy of this program, that you have massive flagging troll campaigns, which we all know exist. And even if it's not some orchestrated thing, you telling me that you can't get 50 of your friends in a circle, in a group somewhere to be like, hey, let's go attack this video that we all don't like. I'll flag it today. And YouTube will take notice of it and they'll be pressured to do something about it. That's what this is. And obviously, this is going against the World Health Organization guidelines because we're daring to point out that this may be, even in part, not just about the coronavirus. Well, then there you go. And we're going to note on that whole World Health Organization absurdity today in regard to how we're not allowed to challenge a group that has been caught lying numerous times, a group that has already changed what it said about 5 times since this started. So if we weren't able to counter it then and they're wrong then and now they're saying something else, maybe we should be like, hey, maybe they're wrong this time again. Oh, censored, can't say that, except that they were wrong before. See the paradox there? This is ridiculous. This is censorship because you're challenging authority. That's what it is. Now, I hope you will take the time to look further into that specific document. And here's the video yourself so you can see the live stream recording is not available. And I'm going to appeal the decision, but as usual, just like the last one in regard to Dr. Boyle that was removed, even though the mainstream media is literally talking about what we talked about right now, and they removed it on those grounds, it's still gone. They'll never come revisit and be like, oops, we were wrong. Sorry about that. This is gone because of a political motivation. That's why. This is the article, by the way, on the website that you can see for yourself. All this will be in the show notes for you to look at because this is still accessible. The podcast is still available. And as I said, the video was deleted due to ongoing baseless YouTube censorship. The video can be viewed here. Here's the BitChute link. So you guys know, I mean, we're constantly pointing out that YouTube is censoring. But right this moment, we are multi-streaming on like 7 different platforms. And then we post it on about 5 different more after that. So we're by no means relying on YouTube, but obviously that's where the most people are and usually where the most lost people are. So we're trying to reach them. My goal here is not to speak to people who already agree with me. My goal is to reach people who are lost. If it's only 1 a day, I'm doing my job. That's what the point is. So when I put this out, it's not to say, look, censoring, that's the only thing we have. We're everywhere else. So I hope people know that. We're already on BitChute. We're already on all these other platforms you might suggest. And by the way, here's the article that Whitney wrote that this is based on. So even if you can't find the link, this article on The Last American Vagabond, which I highly recommend you read other than just listen to us talk about it, so you actually fully digest everything. Techno-tyranny, how the U.S. national security state is using coronavirus to fulfill an Orwellian vision. To make this very quick so we don't rehash it all, the bottom line is that they had a plan that was applied in regard to artificial intelligence that was being applied to previous agendas. So before coronavirus was around, before this whole idea, they were using this AI plan and trying to institute it using other justifications. Had nothing to do with viruses. Then suddenly we have coronavirus problem, and now they just took that same exact plan and said, perfect, this is exactly what we need to fight coronavirus. Which, who actually believes that? What are the odds that the exact plan for something totally different is exactly what we need to fight a completely unexpected pandemic that, as they tell us anyway, that, that's totally outside of what we're, it's ridiculous. The point is they're pushing this plan in because it's what they wanted to do, and it has little, if anything at all, to do with coronavirus. And that, my friends, is why it was censored. Because this is exactly the thing they don't want you hearing. Not two-party paradigm nonsense. Not talking about Joe Biden or Donald Trump's election or, the ins and outs of the two-party deception or China did it or all the different things they're trying to push in right now. This is about the people who are awake from that illusion. And that's largely unpopular with the people still lost in that paradigm, but that's what they tend to focus on because that's what gets to the truth. And as I said in the tweet, YouTube just censored another TLAB video for yet another unaccountable community guidelines violation. The video about the AI coronavirus plan. But lucky for you, not all platforms are as authoritarian and unaccountable as YouTube. Here's the BitChute link. So please watch it for yourselves to see exactly what they don't want you to see. As always, and I'm going to have another note later on in the show about the Erickson doctors, Erickson, I always forget the other guy's name, and I apologize for that. But the Bakersfield doctors that were speaking that were censored. Because that's exactly what's happening here. Not just, there's claim, excuse me, sorry, something getting in my throat today, but despite, the bottom line is this is not misinformation, as they said about the other doctor's video, right? This is data based on the evidence. Or excuse me, this is discussion based on the evidence, based on the data. So you can disagree with that. We can think you're coming to the wrong conclusions. But when you censor that, that is censoring to control the information. That is censoring an alternative opinion of the same data. Very different. And I hope people see that difference. And when you notice that it's happening, you have to realize that's not for your benefit. That's for their benefit. Now, as this is happening, as we're seeing the narrative completely challenged, as we're continuing to see the lies get, I guess, pushed forward, as we can see the evidence get ignored everywhere, constantly, day in and day out. We have to realize some of the more horrifying things that are being pushed into this because of these lies. Now, what I keep trying to say on this, as much as I am saying, in my opinion, and based on the evidence, that it's very clear that we are being lied to a certain degree. How much is up for you to decide, but I think it's very obvious. But as I keep trying to say, even if you think I'm crazy and think, well, it's completely real and this is the worst thing we've ever dealt with and we all have to be scared, even if you think that, even if that is the case, what we're going to talk about next is something that you should be concerned about, that is being forced in because of this, and it shouldn't be. Something that has no basis in science. I mean, everything we're going to talk about in this next part is something that has been tried to be pushed in before, just like the AI program we talked about. And suddenly now it's perfect for coronavirus. What do you know? Exactly what we've always been trying to do. Now they're going to push it as we have this new thing because coronavirus. No, it's what they've pretty much always been trying to do. This applies to all the things we're talking about. Not just the AI programs, everything we've been laying out have all been these plans from before. Medical martial law, biometrics, facial scans, all these things. And they're all happening now. Now, again, I don't want to go into too much of this for two reasons, because one, Whitney Webb's article is going to be coming out shortly about this, and I'm going to also have her on the show to talk about it. So I don't want to go in too deep, but I just want to give you a little teaser about what this is going to be about. Now, in 2006, DARPA announced its Predicting Healing and Disease Program, PhD. Okay, you gotta love the acronyms they pick, which sought to determine, quote, whether an individual will develop an infectious disease prior to the onset of symptoms. Now, first of all, the first thing that stood out to me when I read that. Okay, so we've got pre-crime, which is where they're trying to say, well, we know based on our information and your social media and everything else we compile of your data that we're not supposed to have, that you were gonna commit a crime. Yeah, you were about to. You were warned about, this idea that we're going to now be able to tell whether or not you were going to commit a crime, and that wouldn't be abused in any way, right? They wouldn't come in and kick my door down because I'm saying things they don't want me to say and say, well, our data showed you were about to do this. You clearly have an authority issue. Clearly we can see how that can go. That's something that we've already talked about. Whitney's written about that as well. Pre-crime is absurd, not only just wildly unconstitutional, but coming from a government that has abused damn near everything we've ever been put in front of them. We shouldn't be even considering something like that. But now we're talking about what I would argue is pre-crime for medicine. The idea that we're talking about something where they're rolling out a program, or at least they're discussing a program, and this is 2006, which we're going to get to, we're talking about today, a program that is ultimately talking about being able to figure out if you are about to get sick. Right? Think about how that applies to today. They're telling people to stay inside, keep your distance, social distancing, right? And now we're saying, well, you need your vaccine cards that's on the table to be able to come back to society. Well, once this all kind of goes away, if it ever does, the idea will then be the 9/11, residue, as it were, in regard to coronavirus, where suddenly it's just, well, we always got to be prepared for if it comes back. Bill Gates says pandemic 2 is right around the corner. So now you're going to have this program where they say, Well, based on our data on your social media and our biometric and heat scans of everybody in the world, since we're all doing that now, we can tell that you're about to get sick. And maybe that just so happens to do with something that I'm talking about online. And maybe it's because we cracked a big story that we're about to talk about. And well, you look like you might have a fever. Got to go to jail just so we can treat you. Now, that may seem ridiculous to people. And it is ridiculous, but it may seem irrational to people. Understand that this is exactly, historically speaking, what has happened. They've implemented a program, abused it to the T, exactly like we've warned about. And then ultimately they'll end up standing on that same thing and pointing back to the same, as if it's a success, because the same thing that they pretended they were stopping, like for instance, if they take you in for this program and they say, well, you look like you might be getting sick, we need to treat you. And then they put out whatever vaccines or whatever they want to forcefully give you because now it's not your choice. And then when you ultimately don't get sick, they can say, hey, it worked. It succeeded. How would you ever know? Think about that. That is what I'm talking about. Now, bear with, for those that think this is crazy, just bear with me. Now, it says the PhD program, the Predicting Health and Disease program, planned to accomplish this by identifying changes in the baseline state of human health through frequent surveillance. So this is the medical martial law surveillance network that they're building right now. And by the way, this is in 2006. They were already trying to do this, and now COVID-19, hey, perfect for them to do. Perfect for their previous agenda to apply now. Frequent surveillance with a specific focus on viral upper respiratory pathogens. Isn't that interesting? So in 2006, all those years back then, they were already planning specifically to track a viral upper respiratory pathogen. It's almost like they saw it coming, right? 3 years later, 2010, DARPA funded researchers at Duke University, creating the foundation for this tool, which would use genetic analysis of blood samples to determine if somebody is infected with the virus before they show symptoms. So you just, take their word for it. Reports at the time claimed that these preemptive diagnoses would be transmitted to a national web-based influenza map available via smartphone. This is 2010, guys. Exactly what they're rolling out right now. Contact tracing, right? But with the momentary omission of the pre-crime medical aspect, right? Now, following the creation, and the point being, this isn't hypothetical. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is DARPA's own documentation. This is what they're working on. Now, you could argue whether or not that's being used now, but this is the point. This is what's being rolled. Now, following the creation of DARPA's BTO in 2014, which is this is the specific program that we're talking about. This is the BTO is I forgot to grab the name. It's the acronym. I'll follow up on that. But this is, you guys will see when we talk about this in the future. It's biological, technical something. It's the name of the group we're talking about. I just pulled the caption here so I could read it to you guys. But following the creation of DARPA's BTO in 2014, this particular program gave rise to the In Vivo Nanoplatforms program. Now, even just the name of something like that obviously makes the, conspiracy theorist accusers go wild, right? Oh, nanotechnology, vaccines that are going to, like that's so out as they're literally talking about this on their own documentation. Now, the diagnostics branch of that program, abbreviated IVN DX, quote, investigates technologies that incorporate implantable nanoplatforms composed of biocompatible, non-toxic materials in vivo, in life, or, that's the broad translation, sensing of small and large molecules of biological interest. Multiplexed detection, it says, of andalites at clinical relevant concentrations. This is from their own quote. An external interrogation of the nanoplatforms without using implanted electronics for communication. So basically saying that this is some external interrogation of these implantable nanoplatforms. Bottom line, something that could be via vaccine. This is what it's all about. Interrogation of these platforms without using implanted electronics. So from outside your body. But it's all for your protection, right? Because they just want to make sure that you're not sick. That's the argument. Now, past reports on the program describe it as developing classes of nanoparticles to sense and treat illness, disease, and infection on the inside. Ignoring all the other things it could potentially be used for. It's just for your safety. Now, the tech involves implantable nanoparticles, which sense specific molecules of biological interest. That's their quote. Now, DARPA's IVN program has since helped to finance and produce. This is the part that just blew me back. Quote, soft, flexible hydrogels that are injected just beneath the skin to perform monitoring and sync to a smartphone app to give the use immediate health insights. I mean, this is science fiction type stuff. Am I wrong? I mean, this is the kind of thing that really, this is one of the links from the article itself. Soft, flexible hydrogels that are injected just beneath the skin to perform monitoring and that sync to a smartphone app. This is a product currently marketed and created by the DARPA-funded and the National Institutes of Health-funded company, Profusa, which has received millions upon millions from DARPA in recent years. And they assert that the information generated by their injectable biosensor would be securely shared, of course, and accessible to, quote, individuals, physicians, and public health practitioners, right? So basically, if anybody, an authority figure, wants access to your personal biometric data, it's there for them. Because who would ever assume that a public official, an authority figure, would have, nefarious intentions? That's never happened before. And the current push, as she points out, for a national contact tracing system based on private health data is likely to expand the data sharing, conveniently fitting with DARPA's years-old goal of creating a national web-based database of preemptive diagnoses. Preemptive. Now, does anybody else see how alarming that is? Coming from a group that, preempt, to be able to tell you that you're gonna get sick and we need to treat you now because you're about to. We're at a point where people are flipping out, and rightly so, about potentially being forced to take current vaccines. And now we're talking about things with injectable nanoplatforms and on top of that, potentially soft, flexible hydrogels that are injected in order to monitor you. This syncs with your app. Cool. This is crazy stuff. And this is happening right now. Now, she points out, Profusa is also backed by Google, which is intimately involved in new mass surveillance contact tracing initiatives, as well as 2 different Chinese biotechnology venture capital arms, and counts former state majority leader William Frist among its board members. Now, think about that for a moment. As everybody on one side of this argument is just wringing their hands over the fact that there's one connection out of 100 that they're pointing to about how China's tied to Fauci or whatever they're trying to make, reductive about that one thing. Even though it's not just Fauci, it's the U.S. government, and it was their material that they gave, and they're tied in with the creation of that lab. And it's just so nonsensical to be like, Fauci did this with them, and that's the only suspicious part about that whole narrative. Clearly, the U.S. government is aggressively tied in with everything that was going on in that lab. That is U.S. government research. As Dr. Buttar said on this show, no matter where it came from, the U.S. government is responsible for this. That's bottom line. That was his quote. Because it's their research. They were the ones that helped create that lab. North Carolina sold them, the university sold them the material they used to experiment on. And it's just crazy to think like that. But here my point is that this group, Google, working with contact tracing surveillance groups, 2 different Chinese biotechnology venture groups in regard to contact tracing. And why is that not alarming? Right? The point is that there are Chinese groups that aren't necessarily tied to the Chinese government, just like there are American companies that aren't necessarily tied to the American government. Obviously, we know that both those governments are aggressively trying to make that just not the case, where they obviously are controlling basically everything that goes on, but that is the case. There are groups like that. So having that tied could mean something, or it could not. But I find it interesting that where people are willing to point out the one that they want you to see. Meanwhile, as I'm trying to show you, there are a million different connections. Not really a million, but a lot. Even in regard to money and funding research. So if that is such a huge, shocking bombshell smoking gun point that money was given to them for this thing, why don't we care about all the other ones? Because that then makes that thing look like less severe than it really was. Seeing as how that it was, millions of dollars over a long period of years that really just is nothing in the long scheme of things in the larger research that's being done involving the U.S. government. But the company also has considerable overlap with the diagnostic company Cepheid, which recently won FDA approval for its rapid coronavirus test and was previously awarded lucrative government contracts to detect anthrax in the U.S. postal system. Now, as of past March, Perfusa again won DARPA funding to determine if their injectable biosensors can predict future pandemics. That's what we're talking about, right? This is what we're talking about. This is not hypothetical. This is not science fiction. This is happening now. Yet we're still called crazy when we talk about this and say we should be concerned. Oh, you're a virus denier, right? It's always reductive. Just like all the other things of the past, right? When you say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be going to war with, over here in Syria. Oh, then you're a Russia shill because not war in Syria is what Russia wants. Really? How about we just don't want war? How about we don't like Americans being killed for foreign, U.S. political agendas? Like, this is crazy that that's how reductive these things are. But that's what always happens because that is the two-party paradigm in effect. It stops you from seeing the full picture. That's what they bank on. But Perfusa won DARPA funding to determine if their injectable biosensors can predict future pandemics, including a second wave of COVID-19, and detect those infected up to 3 weeks before they could otherwise show symptoms. So the point being, as they're rolling out these injectable biosensors, they can basically say, oh, well, we're detecting a coming wave. It's 3 weeks away, but we're starting to detect it because of our injectable biosensors. So we need you all to start taking these vaccines right now. Oh, we'll just bill your health insurance. All right. We have to see how this is something that, at the very least, based on the things they've absolutely done in the past, is where this is driving. Now, the company expects to have its biosensors FDA license for this purpose by early next year. About the same time a coronavirus vaccine is expected to be available to the general public. I guess that's just a coincidence, though, right? It usually is just one of those weird, rare coincidences, right? Never ends. These things are always happening. And the mainstream media and the people that are lost in one side of that two-party paradigm are the ones that keep the masses from really seeing it because they shout you down because you don't agree with their specific reductive narrative that applies to one side of a false two-party paradigm. That's what it is. And that's every time we do this, we're trying to wake those people up, trying to shake them free from their comforting suffocation. That's what it is. It's slowly killing you. Got to try.